What is the strangest thing you've witnessed someone do in public? I saw a dude with a suitcase, completely naked entering our train. His facial expressions were normal. He looked concerned and stared at his phone the entire time until I had to get out. Once saw a man standing next to an extremely expensive looking home jump headfirst into a hedge, pull himself out, look at the hedge, and jump back in headfirst. He continued to do this for a while until someone nearby asked him if he were okay, to which he responded with, "Don't worry, this is my hedge, I'm just bored." Still to this day I respect his casual not giving a fuck vibe. Standing in line in a store at the mall when I hear a weird sound from a woman's large tote bag that is also slightly moving. Could swear I heard a quack. Couldn't be though, except it was. She saw me looking at her bag confused, so opened it and showed me that she had half a dozen ducklings in there. She said she had errands to run and couldn't leave them in the car because of the heat. Made sense, but I think carrying around half a dozen baby ducks in a bag is pretty strange. I saw a woman on the GO train pull out an entire raw white onion from her purse, then proceed to eat it like an apple, as if it were nothing. She was tearing up and didn't seem to be enjoying it much. Once saw a man unicycling through a mall parking lot with groceries bags in each hand during a snowstorm. No one ever believes me. They don't believe me when I first tell them and assume I said bicycle. They really don't believe me when I correct them and say no, unicycle, one wheel. I wouldn't have bothered telling you this if there had been two wheels. An old dude put down his suitcase and started doing a weird interpretive dance. The worst part is that this was in a crowd of hundreds of people and he was staring me down specifically with a creepy smile. I was a couple hundred feet away and when I looked back, there he was. Smiling. Dancing. Eyes locked onto me. I was stopped at a red light and there was a lady in the car next to me. She was having really sporadic head movements. Not the head bob dancing type, but just kinda crazy. After like 10 to 15 seconds of this, her neck went limp and her head just hung forward. The light turned green, and I hesitated a moment wondering if she needed medical care, and was about to pull in front of her to check on her when her head abruptly jerked back up, and she drove off without hesitation. I watched a woman walk into Chipotle, wash her hands for a solid 5 minutes under the Sprite in the soda fountain, and then fill up a trash bag fully with the Sprite and walk out with it. When I lived in Fresno, I lived next to a liquor store that tweakers sometimes hung out at. Outside the occasional meth head talking to imaginary friends, there was one guy that would walk around the parking lot collecting rocks. The best part was when he saw my Samoan friend and put his fist up and shouted "Black Power." He was white lol. Years ago I used to work doors as a bouncer. Had one bloke walk up the road towards me *WELL* into his cups, one step sideways for every step forward. Ick, now what I mean, spot the pub, spot me, and do the old straight on march that every bloke does when they are trying to hide their intox level. Marches up to a hand's breadth away from me, stares over my shoulder at the door. "Evening, sir," I say. No response. "Not tonight, sir," I say. He finally looks at me, slurs something like "Why not?" I state the obvious. He ain't happy with that. Goes on a full minute tirade on how the world was against him, that every bouncer he's met tonight has been a cunt, and that I was knocking him back cause he was Corey, Aboriginal, for Eusebius Reardon. As he's ranting, he's shrugging out of his clothes, and by the time he's done, he's stark bloody naked on one of the busiest streets in the city. He then holds a finger up, like a one moment kinda gesture, then projectile vomits on his clothes whilst trying to maintain eye contact with me. Finishes, looks back at me, gives me the sup upwards nod, then strolls down the street stark naked. Right in front of my house, a couple of guys stopped their car, left it in the middle of the street, and began a fist fight. Then after a couple of minutes of each of them throwing more or less ineffectual punches, they both stopped and got back in the car and drove away. It's that last part that makes it so strange. If an argument had proceeded to blows, then I wouldn't just get back in the car with the other guy, as if nothing ever happened. I moved to a town which had a bit of a bad reputation. The first thing I saw when I was bringing boxes in was a man walking down the street with a bunch of plastic bags on fire. He was holding it like a lantern and was so casual about it despite flaming plastic dripping onto him. Actually like the town though. It's got character. One day, I was heading back to my dorm after class and heard a noise up a tree. I looked up and saw this squirrel holding 3/4 of a very big hamburger. My college campus had its share of fat squirrels, appropriate because it was in Wisconsin, but I had never seen one with such a huge amount of food. I stopped in my tracks and just watched as this squirrel proceeded to scarf down the burger. A friend of mine that was leaving the dorm approached me and asked what was up. I just pointed up and we both stood there watching this squirrel devour this burger. It wasn't a person, but it was still one of the strangest things I've seen happen in public. Reversal, the best place for us as teens on a limited budget was to visit buffet restaurants and stuff as much pizza in our faces as we could. Our favorite place took a long time to clear tables, so we would just move tables after we got seconds. This one time, we finished our first plates, went to the buffet, and went straight to the second table. An older couple sat down by our first table while we were getting our seconds. We finished and as we walked by our first table, I grabbed some food off my original plate, munched on it, and looked at the lady. She was frozen in mid-cringe, horrified. Her eyes were massive. Her mouth was at an odd angle. And she just glared at me. It didn't strike me until after I left that she had no idea that was my plate and just assumed that I was a child monster living on the streets eating other people's slobbery leftovers. My neighbor walked into the middle of the street last week and started yelling "I'm not crazy" at no one in particular, which I'm pretty sure did not help to establish the point. I brought my kids to the ocean. Long drive, but we started early, and as the kids enjoyed the ocean for the first time, a middle-aged woman wearing a uniform of some kind walked by carrying a large, about the size of a small suitcase, cardboard box. She stopped and stared at my kids. It was odd, so I said, "Excuse me, ma'am," and she wheeled on me and started shouting in some foreign language. I had no idea what she was saying, but she sounded pissed. She was literally spitting as she yelled at me. My kids noticed and ran back onto the beach. Then she shook this big box at me, and there was a dull thud as whatever was inside banged around. I dashed around her, grabbed my kids by their hands, and jogged away from her. I looked back, and she was still standing there. This was at a state park, so there were no houses anywhere near there. Weird. There was a man running down the sidewalk who stopped when he got close and yelled "strange fruit," and then farted into traffic, somehow not getting hit. He ran off down the street yelling about strange fruit. I was going to the shopping center in a big city, school trip, to see some movie, and in one village we have been passing through I saw someone trying to cut off a street lamp with a saw. A fucking handsaw. Also, I live in Poland, so we joked that he wanted an outdoor lamp, but didn't want to buy one. I saw a man having a staring contest with a stray dog. He didn't speak. He just stared. And the dog stared back. And I stared at them until I realized I was staring at a man staring at a dog which was staring at the man. I've posted this before, but in downtown Charlotte there was this huge building with a giant marble orb on display in front of it. We were driving past it about 15 years ago, and I watch a man in a clown costume and makeup with a very depressed, almost empty look in his eyes walk right up to it and start humping it furiously. No one was filming him that I could tell, and the weirder part was not one person stopped to stare at it or anything, no audience. Just like it was a normal occurrence or something. I was only a kid then this happened, but one time this group of people wearing masks just stood in the middle of the street. They weren't actually doing anything but just stood there. TBH, I was pretty scared of them, but never really cared. I swear to God, on the way back home one of the people with masks were in my neighborhood. To this day I will always wonder who was it that was part of the group. I was in a bathroom stall the other day when a little boy, maybe 6 to 7 years old, goes in the stall beside me. He sits on the toilet and starts humming some made up tune. That was already a little funny but nothing uncommon. Then he starts *AGGRESSIVELY* humming louder and louder. It gets to the point where it's almost just shrieking, and then he suddenly stops because he's out of breath. 2 seconds later I hear a plop in the toilet and he then begins singing Hallelujah. Hallelujah. I just pooped in the toilet, and repeats it a few times. I was almost passing out from trying to hide my laughter.